slurry gas is a silent killer. And it's ubiquitous. Air movement can be very fickle, and you always need air movement, right? That's one key point. And another key point is that never go into a tank. I will never advise anybody to go into a tank. People can get gassed inside in a tank. So those, for a start, are two key messages to prevent slurry gas deaths.
It's great to be back with another Environment Edge podcast, and you're very welcome to the show. Farmers in Northern Ireland were lucky to escape with their lives in April when they were involved in a slurry gas incident.
Now is the time to think about how we can plan to avoid these potential tragedies on our farms. Dr. John McNamara and Francis Bligh, Teagasc Health and Safety specialists, join us on the show to chat about other tragedies and near misses.
I'm Cathal Summers.
And I'm Deirdre Glenn.
Your Teagasc Sustainability Advisors, and you're welcome back for another Environment Edge podcast number 79, and here we go.
John and Francis, you're extremely welcome to the show. It's vital to think about safety when you're working with slurry. It's a very, very high risk activity. John, you work with the HSE on some cases involving incidences surrounding slurry. Can you chat with us a little bit about what your experiences have been?
No, I want to emphasize that, that we're talking about really people dying or having very serious injuries. So I think it's important that people, keep safety to the foremost in their minds. Sometimes the work kind of takes over and we forget about safety, but that shouldn't happen. Now, the most recent slurry gas alert we've got is from Northern Ireland. And again, we have very good contacts with Northern Ireland. We were in touch with them and up to meet them there about a month ago and that. But on the 21st of April, which is maybe a month ago or less, people, I think it was a weekend afternoon, people were agitating slurry. And I think here's the important bit. The day was dry and warm and calm, most particularly calm. And the cattle were left in the shed and the cattle collapsed. And, our advice would be not to go in, but sure, human nature tends to kick in. People went in and they too collapsed. Now, our understanding from the incident is that the people survived. And that's good news, but we do hear that kind of a story ourselves, regularly. I won't say very regularly, but regularly, and that. Now, the type of cattle housing that we have in Ireland, which is slatted housing with roofs predominantly, that is the most high risk type of housing that you can have for slurry gases. Now, that tragedy in Northern Ireland, caused me to recall the Spence tragedy in 2012. Now, sadly, in that case, three members of the one family, Nevin Spence, his brother Graham, and his father Noel, all died in a slurry gas tragedy. And they were fortunate that the brother and sister survived, and that. What happened was that they were agitating slurry in a tank, and there was a pipe going from that tank to another tank. Now, as I recall it, a dog stuck his nose into a slurry opening and, got gassed and fell in. And, one of the brothers went in and another, and all three died, So I have seen photographs of the scene afterwards, and all I can say is that the whole thing was horrific, So that is the potential of slurry gas to cause multiple, not one, but multiple tragedies. And, slurry gas is a silent killer. And it's ubiquitous. Air movement can be very fickle, and but the key message a few key messages going back to the Northern Ireland incident recently. The day was very calm. You always need air movement, right? That's one key point. And another key point is that never go into a tank. I will never advise anybody to go into a tank. People can get gassed, gassed or suffocated, asphyxiated, I should say, inside in a tank. So those, for a start, are two key messages to prevent slurry gas deaths.
Francis, is there a flippancy with farmers, do you think, on farms around this whole area? Do you think that they're so busy that it's just commonplace and people just go for the actions on the farm, and there is a flippancy around safety where slurry is concerned?
In every farmer's mind, there's a there's a concern. There's a concern for themselves and for people that are working with them, and obviously for contractors doing a lot of this work as well. There's a concern for them. But there's been a kind of a development over time of a certain way of doing this type of work. We have a kind of a behavior of agitating the slurry and doing the work. And then also in the contractor situation, and mostly for farmers as well, there's a short window of time when the job can be done. The weather is a certain way, the ground conditions are starting to dry. In relation to the Northern Ireland case, we had a long wet spell. So a lot of farmers were at that job at that time, trying to get that work done. And waiting for the breezy day or the little bit of a breeze or the morning or the evening for the wind to come, that takes a lot of conviction and, discipline in your mind to say, I'm not doing this, or I'm not letting the contractor do it either, because the wind isn't there. There isn't a breeze blowing. The ventilation isn't appropriate. And also in relation to the conviction and the discipline and the interest and the idea, I suppose, in their mind that those animals should have been moved from that shed before the agitation started happening. So that would have taken effort. And, I don't want to talk about that particular case. There's lots of farmers that would say, I put my hand up and I'm guilty for not doing that. And contractors would say to us regularly that, there is an issue out there on farms where animals aren't being moved out of sheds before they arrive. They come in on the yard, they're going to do a job, and they expect conditions to be appropriate for them to do the work. They're not going to start letting animals out of sheds and mixing animals. All that work needs to be done before they arrive. But in a lot of situations, that doesn't happen. And also it doesn't happen sometimes because, facilities during wet conditions, ground maybe not be perfect in relation to letting the animals out. It might be good enough to spread some loads of slurry on drier fields, but the animals mightn't just be going out just yet. So having facilities available to let those animals out and having penning available to do that sometimes isn't always there either. And that takes a decision in a farmer's mind to invest in that type of equipment, to have a place to put animals when they need to put them. So there's a kind of I suppose, a large number of different thoughts that farmers and contractors and everybody involved in slurry needs to have in their mind, and questions, and to go with the right answer. Do you know what I mean? Go with the answer where there's a safe kind of method of doing the work. There's a protocol put in place that we're not going to do it unless all these conditions are in place. And I would agree with you, Deirdre. That's not simple. Over time we get away with it. We make do, and that becomes normal practice then. And it's not until these situations where that particular unfortunate family were involved in a fatal accident associated with slurry. In that situation it wasn't fatal, but it could have been fatal. It was very close to being fatal. So in the situation in the Longford case, the slurry gas moved up through the pipe into where the farmer was doing some work in relation to milking cows, and he collapsed. What we find really is that farmers will think about maybe staying out of the shed for the first 30 minutes. But in the Amy Gate research, they found that you need to stop the agitator for 30 minutes. So it's not just like put the agitator in and then wait for 30 minutes. It's basically put the agitator in, work it for 30 minutes, and it needs to be turned off for 30 minutes before the concentrations reduce. And one situation, she found that the area around the tractor had over 999 parts per million. So that's fatal levels. you know what I mean, of concentrations. She also found that that particular headspace that John was talking about, the concentrations can rise. And sometimes contractors or farmers will lower the tank a little bit, put in water, and that can reduce the headspace in relation to filling up the tank with slurry. And when you do that, it rises the gases into the shed, and that then creates a toxic atmosphere for people that might be operating. So this situation where you'll see farmers and contractors walking around the slats, looking down into the tank to see where where the lumps are, that can be lethal in relation to the concentrations of gases that can be around you. She also found that it's very unpredictable in relation to how it all happens. So in one shed, you may have very low levels of gas. In other sheds, you may have very high levels of gas. The one main finding that she found was that outdoor tanks and lagoons, the concentrations were much, much lower. So the indoor tanks were where the high risk was. Where there was ventilation, there was low concentrations. Where ventilation was poor or blocked, the concentrations rose. And very, very high concentrations. And we do not recommend it whatsoever of bringing in tractors into sheds and agitating internally.
Am I right in saying that the slurry gas is heavier than air? And also, everybody knows the smell of slurry. Everyone loves it, especially if you have your clothes on the line. But when you get close to that gas, if the levels are high enough, you don't smell it? Is that the case?
Yeah, let's see. No, we're talking about there's lots of gases coming out of slurry, but the most dangerous one is hydrogen sulfide, H2S. And the other gases, just to mention them, are CO2, methane, and ammonia. Now, H2S is got the smell of pungent rotten eggs at low levels, maybe up to 30 or 40 parts per million. The occupational exposure level for the maximum you should be exposed to for 15 minutes or less is 10 parts per million. But both the study, Amy Gates' UK study that Francis referred to, and our own J.J. Lenihan, who did research with Peter Frost in Northern Ireland, they measured levels up to 500 parts per million. And even it can go up to 1,000 parts per million, which is immediately fatal. So that's it. Now, when a slurry is agitated and the crust is broken, the slurry is released. The slurry gas is released, and it tends to come off for the first half hour or so. That's why we say to stay well away for the first half an hour, and again having plenty of air movement and that. The other gases, methane is the one I want to particularly mention. It doesn't happen too much in Ireland, but it can cause an explosion, a kind of a dull explosion. And that occurs because of high meal feeding and enclosed sheds, and it tends to happen in Netherlands and those places. Ammonia can occur as well, but more commonly associated with pig farming and poultry farming. And CO2 that takes away oxygen. It eliminates oxygen, so that can cause suffocation or asphyxiation. So the bottom line is, massive levels of gas can be released, particularly H2S, which are instantly fatal at the high levels. The fatality is due to interfering with uptake of oxygen from the lungs.
Yeah, I want to see, can we dispel a bit of a myth here as well from talking to farmers, but I'm going to bring you back to the Spencer case, Nevin Spencer. It was a high profile case because he was a really good rugby player for Ulster, and he was a prospect for Ireland as well. If he had to survive, maybe he could have been playing there today. So it was a massive tragedy. He died, his brother died, and his father died in the one day. It was a huge tragedy. When I talk to farmers about this, they always say, and I've done slurry myself, agitate, it'll never happen to me. I'll be grand. And that's the kind of feeling that's on the farms. But what farmers say about Nevin is he was really fit. So if they were ever in the situation where one of their family members dropped in a shed, that they'd hold their breath and run in. But from the toxicology reports on Evan, I think he had the highest levels in his system, because you think because he's such a big physical fit player that there'd be no problem. But obviously that wasn't the case.
Well, there's an absolute myth there, and I think you're highlighting it, Cathal, and that is that that you can take in a breath and survive. You cannot. If the slurry gas is there at a high level and you take a breath of it, that's no, you'll collapse. And the gas is still there, so that'll happen. I've a little experience myself with asphyxiation. We were in Northern Ireland, up in Antrim once, and in those more innocent days, they let you put your nose into the vat, and you could see this, this CO2 line down in the vat. So as soon as you put your head down, and you go below the CO2 level, you've zero oxygen, and it feels like getting getting put out for an operation, and no, you just conk, bang, gone. That's all I can say. Now, in this case, now you're standing with your nose in a vat and you can quickly pull your head out, but if you collapse in a tank, like, I'm sorry to say, that is likely to be it. And rescue is I wouldn't, virtually impossible. The legal requirements for going into a tank are, having breathing apparatus, number one, having a winch with two people to operate it, and having training and all of that. Now, sometimes farmers come to us and say, I need to go into a tank, and I will say never. But I will put them in touch with companies that have all the gear and the trained people. Now, it might cost a bit and that, but no, what's the price of a life? I recall a farmer near me whom I knew, and he had 4 young children, if I recall it, and he was anxious to go into the tank. And, I kept saying no, and I put him in touch with our colleagues in Johnstown Castle at the time who were doing a similar job. And, he rang me back sometime later to thank me and to appreciate, what advice I'd given him. Because his mindset was, oh, I'll just go in and I'll get this thing and I'll come out and, I'll take a breath, as you say, but it doesn't work like that.
So we all have stories, I suppose, as well. Like Carl has a story from college. He'll probably tell you now in a few minutes. But here in Kilkenny, I know of a family where the agitation had been done, and the dog went into the slatted unit. The dog collapsed, and the man on the farm, the farmer himself, went in to take the dog out and collapsed himself. And then he didn't die, but the health ramifications for that person going forward, like lung damage, nerve system damage, heart damage, so many things. It's not like once you survive, you're going to be fine. It's like there are ramifications for it afterwards.
No,
and it impacts on your life afterwards.
No, I totally agree that it affects the lungs, the heart, and numerous systems. And no, dare I say it, like the difference between life and death is some maybe little current of air, that's coming the farmer's way at the right time. It's as lucky or otherwise as that.
Yeah, I think, Francis, it goes back to what you said. It takes a little bit of work to prepare for agitating slurry, but we don't want to have to be the people in the parish who are reacting to a tragedy to do the right thing. And Deirdre mentioned that I always remember, I suppose, what we really want to talk about today was stories of how it happens, because I was just talking off air before we came on, but I remember that when I was in ag college, the story we were told, that's 30 years ago now, but Francis, you might explain how this happened, but kind of similar to yours, where there was someone agitating about 150 meters away from a silage pit. There was somebody else working in a silage pit cleaning it off at the time, and it was a quite calm day, as you described. But You think 150 meters away from the agitation, you'd be safe enough, but whatever happened, the gas traveled up the yard along by wall into the silage pit and actually killed the guy working in the silage pit. So that gas didn't disperse. It obviously just is able to move.
Logically, you're thinking about it in relation to it can move through a pipe, like under pressure, I suppose. As we say, that it is heavier than air. So if the weight, I suppose, it'll go up to the top of underneath the slats, and it'll rise. And if there's no movement away from the area, it'll kind of go up through the pipes and up into an area where maybe the person is working, or it can go along by walls as well. So obviously you can think about it like water; it'll keep rising, and it'll keep moving just like water. So it can move into areas that might be lower in the yard, that are blocked off, and that the ventilation isn't dispersing it. So like in Amy Gates' research, she found that you need a fairly substantial amount of actual air movement to actually dispel and reduce the concentrations. So really what we need to think about is like that if you're working in an area where you feel that there isn't a sufficient amount of ventilation, and that there is a possibility that the gas can kind of move along pipes or move along walls into those blind ins, is what they kind of call them. And you only need to walk in there for a second and take one lungful of it for it to have an effect on you. So it's afterwards, it's very easy, I suppose, to go along and fault tree analysis and figure out how the gas got to the place it got to, and that it caused the injury or it caused the fatality in some situations. But it's to think about this beforehand and in our own yards, in our own situations, in the facilities that we have at home. It's to kind of risk assess these type of jobs in our own personal circumstances on our own farms. If every farmer tried to do that and think about these things, it would make the farm safer and slurry, I suppose, agitation, and reduce the risks associated with gas.
Francis, silage effluent. A lot of farmers mix silage effluent in through the slurry. That's even more potent again, isn't it?
Yeah, well, what I think about in relation to this is that when you introduce high nutrient content materials like slurry effluent, like milk, very rich slurries coming from, sometimes people would mix in pig slurries, where there's a lot of energy in the system, you're going to have more activity and more bacterial activity. And that can increase, I suppose, the concentrations of, and what they also find in the research is that, if you have higher volumes of slurry, then you're going to have more activity. If the slurry is there for longer, it has more time to have those kind of reactions and have that activity. All those kind of things increase the risk of high concentrations of H2S. But what Amy Gates' research will always tell us is that it's very unpredictable. You could have a silage effluent in one tank and it has an effect, and you could have a silage effluent in another tank and it doesn't have an effect. So we really always have to work on the basis that the gas is there. You know what I mean? You'll hear farmers saying that, my slurry is just coming from poor quality grass and there's a couple of suckler cows. There isn't much nutrients there. I've never had gas before. It's not going to happen. I don't need to take out the cows. Well, you could have high concentrations of gas in that tank. And another farmer might have very high nutrient content slurries and have no gas. So our message really is always work on the basis that the gas is there. And don't be kind of trying to fault tree analysis. Her research, Amy Gates' research, really tells us that you can't actually predict. No matter how much research you do, you can't predict. We can understand or try to understand, but we can't predict whether the gas is actually going to be present or not. So we have to work on the basis that it is.
I think slurry gas is there most often, as you say, when effluent is there, when it's stored for a long period and in deep tanks. And, when slurry is left, let's say it's left over the summer period and the weather gets warm, fermentation increases and the slurry gas increases. Now, gypsum is used to bed cubicles and that has sulfur in it. And, that fairly dramatically increases the level of slurry gas in it. Now, I just want to make a very important point, and there's slurry gas and they're drowning, and sadly, they're all fatalities. I think it's 6% of fatalities are in this area. Pathologists have a difficulty in deciding where somebody might have drowned or somebody got gassed. But I think in addition to slurry gases, we would say that you should always cover manholes, right? And outlet points, because it's very easy just to step back. You're walking around the slurry tank and there are an agitator and there's a hole there, and you just step back and you fall into slurry, which is 5 or 6% solids. And the agitator is swizzing there beside you. It's well nigh impossible to get out of that scenario. Cover all outlets so that you don't fall in. Maybe could I just make a quick comment as well about facilities? I'd say no. Back in the 90s, led by ourselves in the department, we've gone for outdoor manholes. Now, they're not all outdoor, but you won't get a grant now without an outdoor manhole. So I think that is very good and very worthwhile and very positive. But I'd go back to the calm day. If the day is calm, whether you're indoors or outdoors, it's highly dangerous. Maybe another quick point is that looking forward, there's climate change on board and that. I just wonder if people have enough slurry storage and facilities and that, going forward. So it's worth a thought to see what you need, because, if you haven't the right facilities, you'll be trying to extract slurry and spread it and that sort of thing, in the wrong time of the year and, where the weather is compromised and that sort of thing.
No, I'm glad you mentioned the drowning as well, because I remember on the Late Late Show a couple of years ago, they had a story about a poor child that actually was walking across a farmyard and fell into an uncovered tank. And I suppose it's a good message just for a 2-second job, just cover the place up and just have it right. And I suppose taken from the conversation today, to wrap up, I think the main message coming from you both is don't wait for a tragedy to make you do the right thing. Just spend a bit of time, get the thing right, and then hopefully all will be well.
Just one point to make as well is that there's TAMS grants available for farmers who wish to try and do some work with tanks. So there's TAMS grants available for extending their tanks to have outdoor agitation points. There's TAMS grants available for the bubble systems that reduce the need for the aeration system. Yeah, there's TAMS grants for circulation pipes. So it's important to talk to your advisor if you think there's a problem in your yard. There's also TAMS grants for cattle handling facilities if you don't have a place to put cattle. So talk to your advisor, kind of devise a plan if you think there's a risk there, and do it in small chunks over a period of years. You know what I mean? It's not easy to have money for everything at the same time, but decide what's important, what's needed to be done, and make it happen.
Make a plan, isn't it, Francis? Yeah.
People ask us a lot of the time is why can't you get a slurry gas meter, right? No, we can't recommend them for a couple of reasons. One is they're not robust enough and they don't fail to safety. That's one point. And then there are always background levels of gas. They go off at the OEL level, which is around 10 parts or maybe 20 or 30 parts per million. But those kind of background levels of gas could be there easily, so they're going off. So people that have used them say, well, no, this thing is no good. It just goes off at the get-go and it keeps going on. The last point is that we have done a number of leaflets ourselves and the HSA. We reviewed them, dare I say it, after the Spence tragedy. I will send you on the links, and I think we have a lot of further information. So we will give you the links for the information that we have.
Super. Look, we're coming up to first cut silage, and there's silage cut already, and there's going to be a lot of slurry spread now in a little while. So really important message and very good points made this morning, and hopefully everyone will try and do their best to keep on the right side of things. So thanks a million, lads, for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. Thanks, Deirdre.
So there you have it. Tune in next time to hear more interesting chats and discussion.
Myself and Deirdre will be back in 2 weeks' time, but do give us a review on Apple and Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening to the Environment Edge podcast.